Have you ever worked in the metaverse? Well, I have, a lot of people have, and probably you will in the future, and more people are going to work in the metaverse in the future. I'm going in this video to show you some examples on how you can actually work in the metaverse now. And this video is part of a series of videos on the metaverse, and it's also focused on the use case. If you want to have a more generalist views about other use cases, you can see this video where I talk about the use cases that I believe are very trending right now. So, how can we actually work in the metaverse right now? There are different ways to do so, and actually not all of them include wearing crazy headsets or lenses. Some of them just include using a computer and having it just here on your desktop, basically. So when we talk about working in the metaverse, of course, one of the main players in that field that decided to invest a lot of money is Microsoft. Microsoft is the leader worldwide of enterprise software, of course, and their vision of how metaverse and everything that is around VR and augmented reality can help work better is that with Hololens, you could basically not require having a computer anymore. So their vision is that they want to target the 80% of the workforce that they call the first line workforce that work on the ground and that don't have a computer, but that could benefit from using things that are computing, basically. So what is very interesting is that they created this HoloLens that are a way for somebody to actually work physically in the real world. So through the HoloLens, it's like glasses, they see the world, but with the screen, it adds some elements so that they can have some augmented reality things that will give them some indications. So one of the use cases that I love of this technology especially is the one that I'm going to show you in this video. So basically, as you can see, the person is doing his job. And what's great is that with the lens, he can get some additional indications because he's talking live with someone who can see, because there are cameras also on the HoloLens, what he's doing, and then they can draw some indication like do this, change this, etc. So it's a very good example of how a first line worker can benefit from using a computer without having to be on a keyboard, mouse, and having actually a desktop, but having something that is working and useful for somebody who's actually physically working on something. So that's one of the very interesting way of using metaverse to work and collaborate and potentially also learn, because you can also create experiences where you can do simulators with this. So not only with HoloLens, here I'm going a little bit further, but there are also a lot of programs right now and a lot of startups that create simulators based on VR headsets. And why is it interesting? It's interesting because imagine you're learning to pilot a plane. It's much more immersive and much more realistic if you can do it in VR and actually doing physically the things that you are supposed to do in a plane rather than typing something on your keyboard and using your mouse. So that's also another very interesting way of how we're going to work in the coming years. We're going to work using VR headsets, very likely, to have simulated experience of how we are going to do our job in the future. Okay, so we've seen some things that require a lot of technology, like the HoloLens from Microsoft. It's very expensive, to be honest. It's like, I think it's almost $4,000 for one pair right now. So, of course, it's very expensive. The VR headset, if you want to have an experience with a very realistic simulation, it's also very expensive to develop. And then it can be quite expensive in terms of device or computer to be able to use and generate this simulation. Are there some use of the metaverse that are actually closer to us and that we could use, everybody of us, every day in our everyday now? Actually, there is one that I personally had the chance to use and that I absolutely love. So this metaverse, it's called Gather. So it's quite difficult to explain what it is, and I believe it's much more helpful to see it working. So I'm going to show you exactly how it works. So here is a demo video of on YouTube actually by Gather about what is their service. So here what you see is that you simply have a character. So it's something you access on a web browser. You don't even need to install a software. You can install a software, but you can also directly use it on a browser. So it's extremely light. But the software is also very nice to have. So you don't need a crazy computer. It's very easy to use. And basically, you have this little character, like in a video game, and you have an office that is materialized, like you can see here, by walls and rooms, etc. And with your keyboard, you move into this world like you would physically move in an office. And what is extremely interesting about that, and that's actually the killer feature of this kind of service, is that when you do this, let's say you want to go to a meeting, when you walk in the corridor, what happens is that you can bump into people. And when you bump into people, and this is what is happening here, you can talk to them. You can activate your webcam or not. You can activate your voice or not. And basically you will hear the person in your room here when you walk next to them and they talk to you. And this is very interesting because it creates a real feeling of presence with your colleagues that sometimes you can't see because you are too far apart. So this is extremely interesting for remote teams, of course. And I believe that even in traditional companies and business, now that we have more and more remote work, in some companies you have 2 days of remote works. But what happens is that not everybody takes their remote works every day. So basically the probability, the chance you have to meet physically one of your colleagues is 1 day out of 5 sometimes. And then if you count also holidays, people sick, etc., they are very limited. With this kind of service, even if you are remote, you still have this opportunity to bump into people. And what I like also in Gather, and I really liked using it, is that you can customize your environment, you can create your own office. So for also businesses, and it's the case of my business actually, that don't have, we have a physical office, but we don't go to the physical office. People prefer to work from wherever they are. And personally, I prefer to have the opportunity to be with my clients rather than invest money in an office in a city that will be different from where 80% of my clients are, because none of my clients are in the same city most of the time. So I prefer to invest time for myself to move physically and go see my clients rather than to invest in building an office. But with such an option, I can actually create an office space that looks nice, that has this vibe, that has this culture, where I can invite my colleague and where we can have this chat. And I think it's very interesting. It's also interesting because it's a way also to show up at work. So in the startup where we were using this system, it was also a good way to know who was at work, at what time, and you would see them in their office working. When you put your character in front of your desk, in your office in Gather, it shows that you are here working on something. So they know you are here. They know they can ask you something or not. It depends of your personal rules, but it can be actually very useful. This is a very good example that shows that Metaverse can be useful now. And Metaverse can be also useful even without super high technology, VR, 3D, and crazy machines. And I think it's also a very good example to show how Metaverse can create more a sense of presence. And I feel that this can be a very good use of Metaverse in a context of work, especially in a context where we are more and more distant from each other, we are working more and more remotely, and it can be very interesting to create more link and more sense of presence between humans, between us, when we work through this kind of service and this kind of Metaverse. Well, I hope you liked this video. It was, as I said, part of a series of videos about the Metaverse. Please do not hesitate to subscribe and click also on the bell if you want to be sure you will receive a notification about the next video. And comment, like, any support is welcome, and see you in another video.